Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles.
Today we're going to finish our Islamic stuff and begin to move into the modern period, I hope. So I want to quickly do the two of the things in your packet, and since nobody asked for any more copies, I will assume you have it handy. So we are on page 2, Jews in the Hadith. Stones reveal where the Jew is hiding. But before we look at this, I have you have a brief presentation here of what a Hadith is. I'm now going to read to you what the Encyclopedia Britannica has to say about a Hadith. Okay, Hadith, corpus of the sayings or traditions of the Prophet Muhammad, revered by Muslims as a major source of religious law and moral guidance. It comprises many reports of varying length and authenticity. The individual reports are also called hadith, plural hadiths. The word hadith is derived from the Arabic root ch-d-th. By the way, again, it's a triliteral root like Hebrew, three-letter root, okay? Signifying to happen, to occur, or to come to pass, and encompasses a range of literal meanings, including conversation, discussion, speech, and small talk. In English, the term is translated variously as report, saying, or tradition. It is closely related to sunnah, literally established custom or habitual practice, which is in Islamic context, refers to the norms and practices affirmed or instituted by Muhammad. Okay. So that is what the Hadith is. As I said before, it's sort of like it's parallel to Talmud and Midrash in the Jewish tradition. And you see over here, the one that this is coming from, the stones reveal. Okay, so this is the Hadith collected by the Muslim scholar Muhammad Bukharian. After being transmitted orally for generations, it was completed in 846 CE, and Sunni Muslims view this as one of the two most trusted collections of hadith, along with Sahih Muslim. The Arabic word Sahih translates as authentic or correct. Okay, and Sahih al-Bukhari, together with Sahih Muslim, is known as the Sahihayn. Well, you can see that ending ayin is like the Aramaic ending of a yud nun at the end of the Aramaic ending, Semitic. All right, so you can see the Semitic language here. Okay. Anyway, so here we have the stones. You probably have heard this before. This is a very famous one. Somebody please read, stones reveal where Jew is hiding.
I'll read.
Thank you.
Apostle Muhammad said, "You, that is the Muslims, will fight with the Jews till some of them will hide behind stones. The stones will betray them, saying, 'O Abdullah, that is slave of Allah, there is a Jew hiding behind me, so kill him.'"
Right, okay. So that is something that, we hear extremist Muslims, imams today, referring to this. I mean, I first heard about this in some report, and I forgot where initially, that came as a translation. Oh, I think, whatchamacallit, in Israel, there's an entity that translates Arabic speeches and movies and documents and so forth, and it's pretty reliable. And Margaret, you remember what it's called?
Isn't it, I'm not Margaret, but isn't it Memory? And it's actually based in Washington, D.C.
Memory, MEMRI. Yeah, Memory.
It's based in D.C. It's not based in Israel.
Where is it based? In D.C.?
Washington, D.C.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Memory. Okay. Anyway, and so, the imams, this is equivalent to what the Haredi rabbis have been saying about Muslims, that they are the biblical arch enemy of the Jews and need to be killed. So, I mean, you've got these extremes on both sides using the outlying areas, shall we say, of the two traditions against each other. And it's unfortunate that people who are supposedly spiritual people use these things this way. Anyway, but this is a classic one that people often talk about. Now the next one.
Just before you go to the next one.
Wait, Barbara, raise your hand before you talk.
I'm sorry.
Yes, Barbara.
It's from what I understand about the Quran is it's a very peaceful document and doesn't mention killing or anything like that. Whereas now we're seeing this hadith, which is talking about killing Jews. How did it come about that from the Quran they changed it completely? And now I understand, because of just this short bit, why so many Muslims feel that they should fight and kill Jews.
Yes.
How did it come? Do you know anything about how this came about after the Quran?
No, the Quran has elements within it.
It does.
That can be easy, like this. In other words, this is a hadith. Remember, keep in mind, Christians believe the Jews follow the Bible. They don't understand that we actually follow the rabbis, right? Wait, Margaret, you're
the Talmud.
Yeah,
no, right? I mean, it's interpretation.
Right, exactly. All right. So the Talmud has different perspectives on the world, on life, than the Bible does. I mean, so for example, in Masachet Avodah Zarah, in the Mishnah, there's a statement that says you cannot be alone in an inn because the Romans, this is against the Romans will come in and either kill you, rape you, your wives shouldn't be around because they'll rape the wives, okay? And all kinds of, they will force the women to have sex with cattle. I mean, it's all these horrible things that certain rabbis express out of anger and powerlessness in dealing, with the Roman. And, there are statements, the only good goy is a dead goy. And there's even a statement, Tov me ha-goyim harog, kill the best of the goyim. I mean, it's in the Talmud, all right? And then that has been used against Jews by Christians who know the Talmud in the Middle Ages, and it percolates from time to time. All right, I'm sure there are people today, either on the far right or the far left, who will use these things against us. Okay, so that's the Talmud. All right, so in the Bible you have, who I alluded to before, the Amalekites. All right, so they are they have to be totally wiped out, genocide. It's in the Torah. Okay, that concept is there. So you have rabbis on the one hand who talk about the fact that the Arabs, the Muslims, are the Amalekites. Wipe them out. All right. The same thing that you have here, this notion that in the Hadith that we just read, the Jews, right? The stone says, kill them, right? And so the Muslim knows where to kill the Jew. So you have in both of these the oral traditions of the written text that take things to extremes that you don't find in the original text. Okay, and that's because look at this. So this particular hadith that we read was compiled in the middle of the 9th century, 200 years after Muhammad.
Right.
Okay, and a lot of things transpired. And by the way, the irony of the whole thing is, and this, and I don't know exactly where this guy lived. Okay, but I can tell you that in the 840s, the Jewish community living in Sora and Pumbedita, in what we call Bavel, which would be Iraq, okay? These communities were thriving under the rule of the Muslims. They were liberal. They were open-minded leaders, the Muslims. They appreciated what the Jews could be part of their society, right? And this is the growth of the Gaonic period. It was the most powerful Jewish community in the world at that time, tolerated by the Muslims. I mean, yes, they were subjugated. And we're going to read on the next page the Pact of Umar, which really clamps down on the tolerated non-Muslims in these countries. These rules and regulations were in many ways ignored. Okay, and that approach continued to operate in Muslim communities even later on. But the irony of the whole thing is, when this hadith was being composed, wherever it was, it may have been in an area where people didn't know Jews that much. Okay, and so the extremes that come out, very often you have extremes that people believe about other people, specifically when the other people aren't there anymore. It's like, remember, don't forget the pictures of the devil with a Jewish badge on him that came out of France and Germany in the 1500s, when there were practically no Jews in the country at the time.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So very often, when you live with one another in many and for prolonged periods of time, we talk about the Golden Age in Spain. Who ruled those areas at the time? The Christians? No, the Muslims did. So I mean, these traditions, it moves back and forth, right? And so, Barbara, in answer to your question, it's not surprising that. And I don't say that the Quran, Muhammad struggles with his ideas about the Jews, as you've seen. Okay, you're going to read something right now from the Quran, this concept of the Jews as apes, right? We've heard in the last decade or two, right, about the imams who call the Jews pigs and monkeys, right? Well, that's the apes here. It doesn't talk about pigs, all right? But you'll see in the Quran, it's sort of compartmentalized. But on the other hand, that compartment can easily be expanded and generalized. So if you're an extremist, right, that's what has happened, all right? If you're a moderate, you sort of say, yeah, well, okay, that only relates to certain Jews, not all Jews, depending upon your interpretation, okay? All right, Tybal.
So maybe just because of my who I am, I always thought that if you take those xenophobic examples, you just cited some about the inn and whatever, but if you take the xenophobic, and they're also balanced by Sanhedrin, all the righteous have a place in the world to come, but it's a much smaller percentage of total text than the text in the Quran and the Hadith about hatred of Jews.
I cannot answer that because I don't know the percentage of the Quran or the Hadiths that really are concerned with Jews. I don't know, okay? And you have to understand, in the case of Muhammad in particular, it was part of his life experience. Remember the parallel between him and Martin Luther. So in the Quran itself, the Jews may appear in fact, they do, because one of the reasons, don't forget, whose name is mentioned most in the Quran? Moses.
Is, right?
Musa.
Oh, no, I thought you
Moses?
I thought you meant what Jewish name?
It's Jesus. It's Jesus.
Oh, go Margaret.
No. Excuse me. Moses is mentioned 5 times more frequently than Jesus.
Okay.
Jesus is mentioned about.
I just heard this from a child psychiatrist that we visited. Oh my gosh, so intense. He said Jesus was mentioned so many more times than even Muhammad.
That's true. Yes.
Weird.
Before Muhammad, Jesus is mentioned 30 sometimes. Moses 150 sometimes.
Wow.
Muhammad only 4 times.
What?
By name. Most of the time he's the prophet, he's the teacher, right? He's got a title. The apostle, you see them here. So that's why you see how many Muhammads are in brackets, because the name is not used for whatever the reasons, I don't know. All right, anyhow. So, but I can't, so the Quran, yes, the Jewish aspect of the Quran is up front because you're constantly dealing with the issue of Moses, because Muhammad sees himself as being sort of the second Moses. And he's bringing the true meaning of Moses that Ezra screwed up, okay? So yes, it's an issue, and it's a larger issue, right? And I would say the Jew, look at the Christian Bible, right? The Jews are all over the place, aren't they? Okay, right? Pharisees, the priests, the scribes, and read the gospel.
all in a bad way.
Yeah, but Rabbi,
right?
can I just say
Would
that,
you say
like,
mostly in a bad way?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's the
right.
sad part.
Right. No, all I'm saying is that when you have the text, the ones that are emerging out of which you are emerging is the biggest problem, because you're pushing away that common denominator with Christianity and Islam vis-a-vis Judaism. They are daughter religions. And the earliest books make no bones about it. Jesus was a Jew. He was circumcised on the 8th day, right? His family seems to have been observant Jews. So he's Jewish.
He never created Christianity.
Wait. Half, I don't say half. I don't know what percentage of the Christian world think about Jesus as a Jew. Sometimes Christians, learned Christians, have to remind their unlearned brethren that Jesus was a Jew. All right? You disagree with me, Margaret? Or you're just saying it's a shame that they have to do that?
yeah, I'm just saying, like, I think you're giving them more benefit of the doubt.
Oh, it's even worse than that. Okay. All right, fine. I won't. No comment. All right. Anyway, but do you understand my point? Okay. So, but here, just to show you where this thing ends up, we talked about the popes and the Jews, right? Papal legislation and how hurtful it became in the long run. The whole notion of the Jew being a person who thrives in money, right, was partially a result of the papal decrees that says Jews should not be allowed to take money on interest because they subjugate the Christians in the process. Remember? And we talked about that. Okay? Now, so the three major popes who deal with this in the late 12th and the first half of the 13th century wrote thousands of letters, and you look inside and find out how many of them had to do with the Jews. So I forget the numbers with who, let's say Pope Innocent III or Innocent IV. Let's say 1,500 papal letters. You know how many dealt with the Jews? 30 out of 1,500. It's a drop in the bucket. For us, it's huge. But in the context of how these people operated, the Jews were an issue. They were much more afraid of the heretics in their own tradition. And the trouble that really caused the Jews were the mendicant friars, the Franciscans, right, in the whatchamacallits, the other ones. Anyway, it'll come to. Yeah, so, I mean, they were the ones.
Was it the Jesuits?
No, that's later. Later in Italy. No, the Franciscans and the Dominicans. I think we get it out, yeah. Those two groups pop up in the 13th century. The Pope used them against heretics. They literally absorbed them, gave them a hechsher, and said, go out and get the heretic. And they started to cross the line and get the Jews. And that localized all this stuff. The popes in Rome, those popes were in Rome. And these mendicant friars are in Spain, they're in France, they're in Germany, they're in Italy. They're all over the place, a bunch of Meshuggahs. They're the ones that caused a lot of the trouble. But they had the blessing of the Pope. And the Pope said, the Jews, you be nice, don't do such bad things. But they couldn't stop them because they were working. Why did the blood libels pop up? The popes all denied the blood libels, with the exception of one. Did it make a difference? No. Most of the kings said this is gobbledygook. Didn't help.
So the leaders were saying this is ridiculous, but the masses were fomenting and
yes,
and fighting against their neighbors.
Yes,
and that's because hate for the other.
Exactly right.
Yeah,
and when you're talking, that whole period was a time when there were issues of poverty, disease, war. All of these things were running rampant throughout Europe, and they had to blame people, right? So you blame the ones that seem to be causing all the trouble. So who poisoned the wells? All right. Anyway, okay. So Tybal, getting back.
Just fast. I for those of you who might remember the journalist Molly Ivins, Texas-based, very well educated, and she was the one who publicized often what was said supposedly in the Texas legislature in the 1970s when they were discussing bilingual education. And on the record, a Texas legislator said, if English was good enough for Jesus Christ, it's good enough for the state of Texas.
There you go. Thank you so much. Yes.
We could go further with that. If Judaism was good enough for Jesus, it's good enough for me. How's that? But the problem with that is then it starts to think that you're a Jew for Jesus. No, Jesus was for the Jews. But of course, no one's buying it. But I'm just saying how these things get twisted. I just don't get the complete obsession that Christians had early on with forcing others to convert, to be that, like that was so, as opposed to Jews who really never did that. That's such a big difference, isn't it? I mean,
remember.
Yes. That is such a huge difference.
Yes.
Like,
that applies.
Why, for example, why do Christians want everybody to be Christian?
Right.
And why do Muslims
want everybody to be
Muslim?
Right.
It's
right.
like,
can I answer?
It's like a different, I feel like I perceive it to be a difference in the perception or the appreciation of, individuality.
And freedom. Yeah. And also of God.
Yeah. Freedom.
All right.
Freedom.
Time out. Rabbi's talking now. Okay. Deep breath, everyone. Okay. Yes, but here's the thing. The problem lies in the root of the tradition, right? And so both traditions came out of a missionizing perspective, right? The Muslims, when they conquered the Middle East, made exceptions for the Jews and other groups, Christians, right, whom they felt could be useful, because there was a pragmatic element in their approach at that point in time. I'm talking 7th and 8th century, all right? So in many places, these other groups who were monotheistic, who shared certain values, okay, you guys we'll make you into dhimmis. That sheet will define their status. We'll get to them. All right. And the same was with Christianity. Remember, so the point is, these two daughter religions believe that it is their mission to spread their faith around the world, to get the world rid of pagan belief. The Jews, in their eyes, were seen as tolerable, right? Augustine, 4th century, the Jews bear the Bible. Therefore, got to keep them around, okay? And it's the same notion. Muhammad says the Jews are people of the book, like the Christians, got to keep them around. It's the will of God, okay? But everybody else, convert. So the Christians converted all the Germanic tribes, the Slavic tribes, and the Muslims converted the Turks and the Persians and these and those, etc., all right? And we're left stuck in the middle. And then all these other crazies pop up for different reasons. More often than not because of internal issues within these huge faith communities in the power centers where influential things, okay? So it's a bad thing? Yes, it's a bad thing. But I want to remind you, what is the reason for the existence of the Jew? Existence is spread the understanding that there is one God, okay? And we have the same notion. Read Maimonides. We will tolerate Christians and Muslims because they ultimately believe in Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, Allah, right, etc. Not much difference. The difference is Rambam did not have the political clout that these big empires did, right? There was a time in the 2nd century BCE when the Maccabeans, right, the Hasmoneans, had power within their little niche.
Mm-hmm.
They forced the Idumeans to convert to Judaism. It happened around the year 130 BCE. They were circumcised. And who came out of that conversion?
Herod, the grandchild, who then destroyed the genealogy.
Right, Herod.
Always Tybal with,
Well, it's a genealogy thing because
the knowledge.
All right, okay. All right. My point is that was the only time in all of those centuries that there was a political power that could stand behind the monotheistic faith. And what did that political power do? Convert them for political reasons.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't want to necessarily save their soul.
Rabbi, at least for me, your sound went away.
It didn't for me.
Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, I heard every word.
I'm good.
All right, so Tybal, sorry, it's by you. Okay, Tybal? Okay, thank you. All right, yes, Cheryl. Wait. Yeah.
Sorry. Margaret said something earlier about freedom and personal individualism, individual authority. I can't remember exactly what you said, but
oh my gosh,
the sort of permission to think for yourself is an argument for us having legitimacy. And as I'm thinking about the history, that doesn't apply to most of history. There's like a minute in history where the issue of freedom and personal authority has any say at all.
Oh,
did I misread you?
Absolutely.
What were you saying? Okay.
Yeah.
No,
yeah.
Okay, good.
I'm
All right,
sorry,
okay.
I don't, Cheryl, sorry, you would have to go back and remind me of what I said earlier, but yes, I mean, this is a moment in time, right? This is I mean.
All right, hold on.
Okay, sorry.
I got to go back in time now. All right, I'm going to talk. Anyway, good conversation. That's what I love about this class. You guys have brains and you think and you ask questions, you discuss. I love it. But we must move forward and you must learn how Jews were viewed as apes. All right, so who wants to? Isn't this
I'll continue.
Okay.
The Hadith,
Okay.
Sahih Bukhari.
No. The next paragraph.
But you don't want to finish that paragraph? Okay.
I did already.
No, we didn't.
I read.
You read?
Yes,
Okay. Jews' H, Surah 2. Indeed, those who believed and those who were Jews or Christians or Sabaeans before Prophet Muhammad, those among them who believed in God and the last day and did righteousness, will have their reward with their Lord, and no fear will there be concerning them, nor will they grieve. And recall when we took your covenant, O children of Israel, to abide by the Torah, and we raised over you the mount, saying, take what we have given you with determination, and remember what is in it, that perhaps you may become righteous. Then you turned away after that, and if not for the favor of God upon you and his mercy, you would have been among the losers.
All right, stop there.
Okay.
So, the way Jews or Christians believed before Muhammad was great. To the Jews, Muhammad is saying, this is Muhammad. When we took over your covenant, we, meaning, Moses and Muhammad, so to speak, to abide by the Torah, or maybe it would be Allah, Muhammad. This is God talking to Muhammad. That's what it is. We raised over you the mountain, saying, take what we've given you so that you can become righteous. What is it talking about?
Sinai.
Paul.
Oh, Paul.
Hey, Paul Miller.
The Midrash of holding the mountain over the people when the Ten Commandments were given?
Yes, it's in Tractate Shabbat, Masechet Shabbat, page 88a. I checked it myself. There it is, exactly. Okay? In other words, there's an inkling there that the people needed to be scared out of their wits to get them to agree. Now, if you read the Bible up until the issue of the golden calf, that doesn't seem to be the case. They're very eager to say, yes, we'll listen. Yes, we agree. 3 times they said that, okay? So it's a midrash indicating that it's a challenging thing. Torah is tough. Yeah, sometimes you got to put the fear of God. I mean, that's what it's sort of saying. All right, Muhammad heard this, and he basically quotes it right here, all right? And he's saying, that's really the kind of people you have been. Remember, we've already seen that Muhammad is very disappointed that there are Jews whom he saw in Medina who seemingly were not living like Jews. And he generalized from that because he'd never seen large numbers of Jews. I guarantee you, in Mecca, there were not large numbers of Jews. In Medina, there were, substantial numbers of Jews who were very active in the life of the town. And they were, seemingly, based upon what he's saying, and I'm not surprised, very minimalistic in how they lived their Judaism. They were an outlier. Think about it. They were outliers, right? The small Jewish community live in the middle of the desert somewhere, in the middle of nowhere. Most of the Jews were in the areas, were in, at that point in time, 7th century, they were in Babylonia, in Iraq, right? And there were small numbers in Europe. Most of them were in the Mediterranean basin, and particularly the area of the two rivers. So these were way out Jews. I remind you that 1,000 years before this, there were Jews in Egypt who built a temple there, which they were not supposed to do. Okay, not a synagogue.
What year was that, Rabbi? That
around 400, 500, in 5th century BC.
What's the difference between a temple and a synagogue?
Synagogues, there's no sacrifices in a synagogue. I've always said the only sacrifices in the synagogue is the congregation when the rabbi gives a lousy sermon.
Then why are we a temple instead of a synagogue?
Don't go there. That we'll talk about when we talk about.
It's not supposed to be called a temple.
It's not.
That's what I'm just saying.
Like no Orthodox Jews call anything outside of Israel a temple.
No, the Orthodox don't call temple.
No, it's not a temple.
Wait, all right, you made me. We're off base here. The term temple was brought in the 19th century by the Reform movement in Germany because the synagogue was associated with the kind of Judaism, the image of Judaism that they wanted to move away from. Okay? They wanted to recapture the power of the biblical Judaism and basically diminish the power of rabbinic Judaism. The synagogue was a product of rabbinic Judaism. The temple was the place in Jerusalem where you offered sacrifices. The synagogue is made to replace the temple. Therefore, from the perspective of 19th century reform, it shall be called temple so that everybody knows we're not the synagogue-bound Jews. There are a clear, clean, biblically oriented, ethically oriented group of Jews. And
Rabbi, can you please talk more about that? Because that is a big issue.
Oh yeah, what not?
I mean,
next class.
Margaret, I got you.
Okay.
It's not. This is. Let's put it this way. Wait. I'll bring it back to subject. Okay.
Okay.
By calling it a temple, they hoped that the non-Jews would have greater appreciation for Judaism because it would be defined in a manner that the Christians, understood.
And how that's so questionable at this point.
Yeah, of course. Right? Yes. Yes.
Why did the Jews need to,
Well, Margaret, you got to study modern Jewish history of Europe.
Okay.
That's it. I'm not going to teach that.
Okay.
If you take a good class, go to UCLA Extension. They got a great history department.
Come on, Rabbi, you can do it.
Well, he's a historian. He can do it.
It's not my interest right now. Sorry.
Okay, not right now.
Wait. Okay. Jackie, then Tybal. Tybal, I'll let Jackie go first.
Well, just want to quickly say, sorry, I get what you're saying, Rabbi, but word meanings change. I can think of one word that I don't want to bring up, but it's just nothing to do with Judaism, but it's a word that we all know that used to mean one thing and now means another. But,
what is it?
You can guess. I'm not going to go into it. Sorry.
No, you can tell us.
It's okay. But
wait.
Tell us.
Wait, hold on.
Please tell us, Jacqueline.
Wait, no.
What's the word?
I want to get to the.
What I'm trying to say is every Jew that I've known and still know, when we go to services on Saturday, Not one in the history of me from New York, where I'm from, Manhattan, Brooklyn, and out here. I've never heard one Jew say, I'm going to synagogue today. Or I'll see you in synagogue. It's always see you in temple or shul or services. In fact, that's why one of the ways I know if someone's not Jewish is if they, oh, are you going to synagogue tomorrow? It's like saying Friday night, we'll see you at Sabbath. No, we either say Shabbat or whatever. I'm just saying there's words that change their meanings. So we say temple, we say.
Jackie, got your point.
Yeah.
You cannot, I'm just giving you the history.
Right. No, that's beautiful.
We're talking about the impact, okay?
I love what you're saying. It's fascinating about Europe, but I'm just saying.
I don't use Temple Beth Am.
Right.
Named that because Rabbi Preston, may he rest in peace, used the name of the synagogue where he came from in Philadelphia. Back to his rabbi. Okay. The Hebrew name, if you look on the building, it says Adat Beit Am.
Okay.
Yes?
Adat means
house.
Congregation.
Means community.
Well, Beit is house, right?
It means the Beit Am community.
Okay.
That's what it means.
That's on the synagogue?
What?
That's on the synagogue? I never noticed that.
Yes, there's Hebrew lettering on the front. Look,
that's interesting. Very interesting.
Adat Beit Am. Yeah, sure.
Okay.
All right, Tybal.
So when you said temple in Egypt, I can think of 3 temples. The one at Elephantine, the one at Heliopolis, or the one Ben Ezra in Cairo. And I wanted to know which one.
I'm talking about the one in Elephantine.
All right. And I wanted to make Margaret laugh, which I did.
Okay. All right.
Could
now, wait, we've got to get to the apes.
Could I ask something that maybe you can do very quickly, and if not, forget it. With all the Jews that you talked about, like in Egypt and in Persia and all those areas, there are very few in Europe. All those were our Sephardic relatives, correct? Were they considered Sephardic or just considered Jews in those?
No, the Iranian Jews are not Sephardim.
Mizrahi. They're Mizrahi.
Well, the Mizrahi, but those names they're relatively recent.
Okay.
You were an Egyptian Jew, you were a Moroccan Jew, you were a Bukharian Jew, you were a Russian Jew. I mean, you were more local.
Okay, good.
Okay.
That does it.
Names, an attempt to Mizrahis, there's a certain common denominator there, but even among them, there are very slight variation. I mean, within worship and stuff like that. All right, anyway.
Okay.
All right, so God is wanting us to be, to follow the teachings. All right, now, the number 65.
65. And you had already known about those who transgressed among you concerning the Sabbath. And we said to them, who's we, by the way?
God.
Be despised. God is we?
Yeah.
God isn't the one saying, and you'd already known about? Who said that?
God, we could be God. Remember, Muhammad speaking for God as a prophet would.
Okay.
So he said, be apes, despise. All right? In other words, he's talking about Jews who don't follow Shabbat.
Right.
All right? Muhammad is speaking in the name of God. And would a rabbi hearing this, now he wouldn't call the Jews apes, right?
Right.
But a rabbi in the 7th century who saw Jews who were not observing the Sabbath would be very angry at them.
Yeah.
And would call them something else. Maybe call them idolaters. I don't know what, right? Because, my point is, these Jews in Medina, just put it in history, these Jews in Medina were not living a frum Jewish life, like a distinctly Jewish life, but had assimilated to the point where they're not observing Sabbath. It's very possible that Muhammad is actually, with vitriol to be sure, giving us a picture of Jewish life in Medina. But the historians today will tell you, again, that it is clear that these families had snuggled up with the pagans. That was the whole issue. That's why they didn't stand with Muhammad against the pagans, because their business interests were wrapped up with the business of the pagan element in Medina, who were the majority. Okay? That was the reality. And so therefore you can imagine Muhammad, even if he's, exaggerating, I don't know, nobody knows. We don't know about Jewish life in Medina before the. We don't have. No, there's. What are the records? You don't hear about them. Okay, little tidbits here and there. The point is, it's very possible that at that point these people were not that observant. We know, for example, that in the 4th century in Eretz Yisrael, the rabbis had difficulty getting the farmer Jews to follow all the details of the tradition that they wanted them to follow. 300 BCE, 300 years before this. And this is in Eretz Yisrael itself, in the Galilee, right? They were farmers, right? Farmers do not live the same culture as people who live in town.
Right.
Farmers are not within walking distance of a synagogue. There is no yeshiva in the middle of the farm, right? Those are all in the towns, not the farm. And so these people culturally were removed from the small centers. And I'm talking about a highly reduced Jewish population at that point in the Galilee, not in the southern part. Very few Jews down south. Okay, all right? So the point here is we have these, we like to think of these images when you think of an ancient or a medieval Jewish community. They're all a bunch of Jews running around with black hats, with beards and payas, running to shul, studying Gemara, right? This is what was going on. No. Okay. All right. Tybal, good luck. Everything should be fine. Bye. Okay. All right. So now you see. All right. So, and we made it look at 66. Finish this up.
Okay. And we made it a deterrent punishment for those who were present and those who succeeded them, and a lesson for those who fear God.
Right. So, I mean, whatever punishment, whatever it was, this being called apes, being viewed as a punishment for the people who weren't following the Torah. And that, again, that is something that an Islamist imam is not going to focus on. He's going to take out of this Jews are pig or monkey, right? You can take it out of context because it supports. By the way, that's the problem with Midrash in general, is that it often takes things out of context to lead us to some other point that they want to tie into a biblical tradition. Read Midrashim, you will see they're talking about things. I mean, they'll talk about, it says so-and-so was here and then he was there. How did they get from here to there? Oh, it was because he took these giant birds who will pick you up from here and take you over to there. And people in Talmudic times believed these stories, right? I mean, they were imaginative mythological stories. What do mythologies do, right? They take realities and reshape them in order to explain phenomena, right? And I mean, and the people who take all of these ancient sources literally believe in miracles, right? Because that's what people believed. It happened, boom, right? And that's how God operates. That was their perspective. In the Middle Ages, it's still going on, right? So, and people who read, there are Jews today who, when I talk about the Bible, how I understand it, evolving over time, right? The Torah evolving over time, they go crazy because I'm a heretic. The Bible doesn't say that it happened that way. The Bible says it all happened at one time, right? We're going to argue no. If you look closely at the language and see that there are contradictions, but the Midrash explains the contradiction. Sure, you can explain anything you want, okay? I mean, there are still Jews today, I mean, I will say even conservative Jews, who have clung to the faith that today's rabbis are not as great as Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, and Rabbi Yosef HaGalili, that those were the giants.
But Rabbi, come on.
No, I don't believe that.
No, there's no way.
You're right.
You have to have like a legacy.
Right.
Rabbis.
No, there is a legacy, but the point is, today, a knowledgeable rabbi, what will they know? They will know the Bible. They will know Talmud, right? Which many of those rabbis I mentioned.
But you know what? A lot of them don't actually. And you know that. And you know that.
I'm not saying that every rabbi today is a great rabbi. I mean, is a genius. No, that's not my point at all. I'm saying, however, that the great rabbis of our time whom we look to. All right. And I don't consider I am not one of those geniuses.
One of them is Rabbi Dorf.
He is an expert in applying those sources to contemporary times as an ethicist, yes. But there are areas of practice that as a congregational rabbi that I know more about than he does, okay? So we each have our different areas. No, he's a great rabbi and a very learned rabbi. And in the areas of ethics, medical ethics, he's a giant. And I'll tell you, I mean, he out Maimonides is Maimonides. Because, remember, Maimonides was a doctor, right? Because Elliot Dorff has access to medical science that the Rambam never knew, right? And he can hook it up with traditions the way that Rambam never could.
Well, medical science has changed in the
give me a break. Yes, of course. The whole point is, why should I view like a Rambam, who was a great doctor in the Middle Ages? Well, I don't deny that, but he wouldn't get a job today.
Well, I mean,
my residency.
That's not the point. The point is that it's not that he couldn't get a job, right? It's that he didn't have access.
He couldn't get a job.
Yeah,
he's right. He couldn't have gotten a job,
and so he couldn't have applied.
Yes, exactly right. Margaret, I understand what you're saying. Yeah. He, in his day, had more impact tactically. I mean, literally touching people, curing people, than Rabbi Dorff.
And what about the 12 steps of charity? Didn't he?
That's something else. Wait, no, hold on. That's another discussion. That's Rambam. There's nothing to do with science.
No, but still, you say great rabbis.
No. Wait, no. That's not the point. I do not denigrate Rambam. I learn from Rambam, but I have to extrapolate out of Rambam and transpose to today. And everything that Rambam says, like, for example, his astronomy, is crazy. It's not based upon anything real whatsoever. But the fact that he looked at astronomy as a means of connecting to a theology, I love it. And I am a Maimonidean. I look at astronomy.
That was such a cool statement.
All right. I look at astronomy today and I see it.
Just the fact that, like you said,
you can see God. Just look at the universe.
Look to science.
I'll give you. Yeah, I will.
Science that we have.
Well, hold on, Margaret. Margaret, cool it. You're moving today. Hold on. It's fine. No. It's okay. I'm glad you're in. I love your excitement. All right.
Let me.
Barbara.
Sorry.
Here's me.
I had my hand up.
I saw it. I will get back to you. I will give you an example. I don't know, Barbara, if you were present when I did this. I gave a drash. No, it was on the high holidays, Barbara, so you were probably at Library Minion. This is a number, when I was rabbi of the shul still, okay? And I wanted to talk about this whole notion of understanding God from the contemporary perspective, okay? I had two pictures that I had blown up, so they were like, this big. And I had them brought out and put on two stands on either side of me. And what they were spirals, all right? White spirals against a dark background, okay? And I said, okay, which is a spiral nebula and which is a hurricane? They couldn't tell the difference. Where's the hurricane? I said, that's the hurricane, that's the spiral nebula. Where was that hurricane? Off the coast of Florida. Where's that spiral nebula? Somewhere millions of light years away. What does it show us?
Hurricanes up there, maybe.
No, it shows us that the laws of nature are universal.
Right, but it could be up there. We don't know. I have to go, but thank you.
Yes, okay. No, so the point is, the laws of nature operate throughout the universe. There's one, and as a person of faith, I'm not saying I can prove that means God. But as a person of faith, I would say that for me is evidence of the workings of a single entity that sets the rules for the universe. And that rule applies in different ways to different elements. It's not all the same. And is the universe perfect? I don't know how to answer that, because what is my perfection may be your curse, okay? Not you. But I mean, the ants that I walk on when I walk, I have great respect for the ants. By the way, Judah Halevi said that if you want to see miracles, look at ants and bees. There is a miracle in ants and bees because they run their lives like people do. They live in communities. They share responsibilities. They make things to help themselves. They build things, right? They work together. They sacrifice their lives for one another. Okay, and Halevi, the philosopher, was also a doctor, by the way. He was a scientist. I love that stuff. So all these medieval guys, the whole point is they had this sense that the world around gives evidence beyond the details of our own religious practice, but they validate. When we say Melech HaOlam, praised are you, God, ruler of the universe, we mean it. And you can get support, if you are a person of faith, from looking at the picture of the hurricane and the picture of the spiral nebula. So yes, do I revere Rambam? I do. All I'm saying, though, is I remember at a law committee meeting a number of years ago, Rabbi Joel Roth, who was the head of the law committee at the time. He was the leading professor of Talmud at the seminary at the time. He took the place of two of the great minds who preceded him. And he himself had a great mind. And I remember him making the point that, the issue was, can women sign on a ketubah? Can women serve as witnesses? He was opposed to it because his reading of the sources was that there was no real strong rabbinic authority to validate that. The vast majority of the people on the law committee disagreed with him. He was outvoted, and now women can sign on ketubas. Okay, and the arguments in favor were very strong, but he had this notion in his mind that precluded him from doing that. So we said to him, he said, I went to Lieberman and Dimitrovsky, the two great Talmud scholars who preceded him, and said, what do they think? And they said, no, they really couldn't justify it to their way of thinking. So he said, so I can't. So people said, Joel, you're the new Lieberman and the new Dimitrovsky, okay? You have the same, you're brilliant. You've done amazing things with your knowledge of Talmud and Midrash. We turn to you. So you know what he said in response? He came up to I was sitting right across the table from the guy who had given the paper. So I heard, and I voted for him. It was a brilliant, brilliant paper. Anyhow, so Rabbi Roth comes to him and says, you ready? Maybe in 10 years I'll be able to vote for this. He understood, but he had reverence for his predecessor. The point that it tied is, and our perspective, the different perspective is, you don't have to feel that, okay? You don't have to feel that. If you can produce a different point of view based on tradition that allows for modifications in the law, not negation of, but modification of, God bless. Because we always evolve, and we should be part of the process of evolution, not bucking evolution. All right. Yeah, there are boundaries. There are certain limits. Yes, we should live with them because it preserves a tradition in its totality. That's a different subject. Okay. All right. Now,
let me just say briefly,
yes.
To go back to the question of the difference between what Rambam knew, Margaret, and what we know today. Rambam may have been a great doctor then, but I agree with Rabbi that he would not fit in today's society. I graduated medical school in 1963 and finished my 6 years of training in 1969. So I've been practicing now for over 50 years. I'm an old lady, but I still love practicing. I still love seeing eyes. I still love talking to people. When I finished my training, I could do a cataract by ripping out the whole lens, and then we had put in these thick glasses. It was awful for the patient, but it was all we had. I could, at that time, not have conceived of the way we do cataract surgery or glaucoma surgery or retinal surgery. The surgical practice of ophthalmology is more than 100% different than when I finished in 69. I, in 63, would not have fit in today with what it is, except that I had to learn. I took classes and was able to convert my ability to do a cataract surgery to what is done today. I don't do it any longer because I'm older and I don't feel that it's right. Even though my hands are pretty darn steady, I don't do that much. My practice is small, and people should go to doctors that do a lot of surgery and not just an occasional surgery. But the difference from Rembaum to today is even more huge than it was for me from 63 to today. So medicine has made drastic changes over these last 600-700 years, and doctors then couldn't possibly conceive of what medicine is today. So I agree with Rabbi Rembaum that he wouldn't have fit in. He would have had to go back to school and actually at least do the last 2 years of medical school all over and then do his training. And he wouldn't have believed that would have happened, but he would have had to have. So that I just had to add that because Margaret disputed it.
Margaret, that's what I was trying to get across, was that the role that a man like that played back then
was huge then.
Right. And it's that role, that approach that we're really talking, not the Rambam would never have conceived of egalitarian.
Oh, well, forget that part. He never would have conceived of what medicine is today. He wouldn't have dreamed it.
From a halachic perspective.
Can I say one thing?
Please.
So first of all, I love the conversation we've had today, even though it's not strictly on the topic, but what I learned about Rambam as a head of a Jewish day school was I had a medical question to ask I asked all the rabbis in Atlanta a question because I was challenged by the chiropractors to accept children without vaccinations. And I didn't know, and they claimed a religious exemption because the state of Georgia allowed a religious exemption in the public schools. So I asked our rabbis, Orthodox, conservative, and Reformed too, because I wanted to be fair to everyone. What could Jews give a medical exemption to vaccination? And they quoted all three to me, Rambam. And they said, according to the Rambam, Jews must follow the most enlightened and knowledgeable medical practice of your time, the most authoritative. And in this case, it is the American Society of Pediatrics. So basically, no, you cannot give a religious exemption to people who claim, to Jews who don't want to vaccinate their children. Public schools can do what they want, but you can't give a Jewish exemption. So I think what we learned from Rambam is to use what you learned, Barbara, which is the best, the most advanced knowledge possible. And that's the whole, I think, training of that kind of education that we have in Judaism, which is Torah and Maddah, that we want to have, that Torah is Maddah. The best knowledge is also Torah. That's how I understand it anyway. I made a speech too. I didn't mean to make such a speech. Sorry.
Very nice.
But I'll carry it a step further back. The Psalms, Hashamayim Mesaprim Kavod El, heaven's glory. All right, that's in the Psalm that was written 3,000. And he says, and they talk to it. There's planets, the stars speak. You can't hear it. The silence. Yeah. That's they can't. There's nothing here out there. Now, if you have the modern, I don't even know what to call them. The big dishes that pick up
satellite.
Huh?
Satellite dishes. No.
I'm talking about more than that. The ones that pick up the sound, right? And you can listen and they can hear different sounds that relate to different things that are going on out there. And so if the point is, it's not silent, there is sound that we can't hear, okay? But the fact is, in a certain sense, you take that psalm and look at it, shall we say, poetically or even philosophically, saying that there is an amazing process that is going on out there that we can perceive, and that can help strengthen or really shape our faith. The same thing, right? And that's really what the psalmist is. It's what Heschel called radical amazement. Abraham Joshua Heschel used that term. He said when he looks at the world, amazed. He said, this is so amazing. It transcends the capacity to do what's out. There has to be another sun, another source of power, the evidence. And Maimonides, by the way, is right. I mean, again, I'm a Maimonidean. He says, we cannot comprehend what God is. All we can do is comprehend the results of what God does. I mean, that's a blanket statement. You can quibble with it in certain points, right? But the fact is, in a general sense, I mean, I believe theologically it's true. Right? We think that our little pea brains up here are the most powerful things in the universe. They're not. Unfortunately, AI is going to hit us over the head with that pretty soon. I hope not. But, it's going in that direction. But my point is, we're nothing. I mean, we are, yes, sacred humans. And on this earth, yes, human life, image of God, I get all that. But at the same time, let's not make ourselves into God.
So we have to listen.
Yes.
We have to listen.
Look.
And that means being open all the time to question science. It means to be in amazement and wonderment, like, Barbara, you're a doctor. Cheryl, I don't know what you do. I'm a lawyer. But I mean, we just have to, we have to be open to the stuff that we don't know, even though our jobs are telling us, make a discernment, make a decision, but we have to stay open because we just don't know.
No, of course. I mean, I think we have to be pragmatic as well.
Yes, we have to be pragmatic, but we also have to cultivate an openness or let's say a tolerance for being uncertain.
Yes, exactly. I mean, what was the scientist? Basically it was theory of uncertainty, the uncertainty factor in quantum physics. Who was the guy that he broke? But he said, when you analyze atoms and how they work, there is an element of what's going on there that is non-predictable. It's unpredictable because science is based on predictability. It's built into the system. And that it's almost as if boy, Rembaum hit it right ahead. And this is one of the greatest scientific minds of the 20th century. Einstein doesn't claim God's. He was a believer. You got to listen. We need to be much more humble as a race. They say if God forbid there's ever a nuclear holocaust on this earth, cockroaches. Apparently, they are immune to radiation.
Amazing.
Why do you have to mention that?
Don't tell my wife I said that.
Okay.
Rarely.
By the way, my landlord calls them water bugs.
Well, they're water.
I've heard that.
Yeah, if they're 4 inches long.
Yeah,
they're not concrete. Okay.
Talking about your wife, on July 18th, Friday night, Cheryl and Margaret and their families are coming for dinner. Talk to Freddie and let me know if you'd like to join us.
Okay.
July 18th.
Fun.
Fine. Well, otherwise,
I know that.
Okay, guys, I have to drive my son to a...
Oh, no, it's time to stop. Yes.
Okay.
So, next
Hey,
it's so much more fun.
This was a special day.
Run.
This was a special day. I learned a lot myself. I think everybody has.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
It's kind of nice to have something a little bit different.
We taught each other. All right, next time we're going to jump into the modern period.
Okay.
So we're not going to.
Hadiths? No more hadith, huh?
So the last 2 pages that you sent us, we should read ourselves.
Read the material that you've got.
I read it, yeah.
Omar is written for Christians, but the presumption is that all the other tolerated groups got the same thing. And whenever it talks there about churches or whatever religious rituals, just plug in the Jewish one and you'll see. And remember, that was enforced when there were rigid, narrow-minded leaders. The periods of great productivity in the Islamic world would be those centuries in Babylon, in Iraq, right? 7th to the 11th centuries Iraq, and then from that point on until the Muslim conquest of Spain, the period of 600-700 years, where Jews and Muslims together in relative harmony, and they were years of great explosion, knowledge, science, philosophy, language, poetry, literature, amazing stuff.
Medicine.
That when they're going to come to the modern period, during the course of the 19th and 20th centuries, there were a lot of brilliant minds in Europe, no idea what that culture, and that helped shape a lot of, we'll see, certainly attitudes with regard to people of Semitic origin that opened the door. That's a force button.
That's interesting. I just ask you one thing: as we go into the modern period, how modern are we going?
We're going to basically we will briefly, I have an introduction here that is going to be briefly, half an hour with no question.
Good luck.
Right. Yes. That will come when I'm finished. Anyway, I have to, because just to lay the groundwork, again, what we're going to read, I'm going to be sending you some selection from the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, and from our favorite guy's book called Mein Kampf. Snippets. I want to deal with that next time, I hope. At least you'll have it. And then the last session, what I want to do is read from the Charter of Hamas.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.